Hello everyone and welcome to June's Heritage Live with Coquitlam Heritage. We are coming to you from Mackin House, which is located on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Coquitlam First Nation on whose land we live, work and play. Today's presentation is all about the Fraser Mills train station. We'll learn about how it contributed to the building of our community, and we will also take a look at some of the artifacts on display. Our train station and caboose are now open for the summer for tours. Visit us from 11 to 5 Friday and Monday and 10 to 4 Saturday and Sunday every weekend until Labor Day. The Fraser Mills train station is also Coquitlam's official tourism center, so visit us for the scoop on things to do and sights to see in Coquitlam and beyond as restrictions lift. We hope you enjoy learning about the Fraser Mills train station.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our Heritage Live for June 2021. We're here at Heritage Square where we have Mackin House Museum and caboose from the 70s that you can take a look through in the summer months, and also Fraser Mills train station, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So just for a little bit of background, when British Columbia was first to join Confederation in 1871, part of the deal was the government would supply a railway to this part of the country to connect it to Eastern Canada. That was completed in 1885. There was many Japanese, Chinese, South Asians and First Nation people who were employed in building the railway. And once the work was finished, some found work in the local sawmills, such as Fraser Mills, which is why Mackin House is here. It belonged to Henry Mackin, who was the first general sales manager. It belonged to the company, but Henry Mackin was the first general sales manager to live here. So the first train station in this location, in this area, was Millside, which was the community beside Fraser Mills, due to its proximity to the Ross McLaren lumber mill, which was later to be known as Fraser Mills. The first passenger train to stop here traveled from Westminster Junction to New Westminster. In 1907, Fraser Mills began recruiting workers from Quebec, which had a well-established lumber industry, which was part of a scheme in keeping with the anti-Asian sentiment of the time. So a couple of guys went back to Quebec. One was a priest, and they recruited a bunch of French-Canadian workers to come and work in the sawmill to replace Asian labor. And the first train load arrived to the Fraser Mills station in 1909. By 1910, the mill and the French-Canadian community were growing quite quickly, and a larger station was needed. So CPR built the first, so this Millside station was second. Fraser Mills. CPR built the first Fraser Mills station at this time, and it was originally located east of the grade that's crossing King Edward Street, which a big dump truck just drove up. So there was also the Fraser Mills interurban line. This station also served as a stop for electric streetcars on the Fraser Mills interurban line, whose service began in 1912. It was operated by the British Columbia Electric Railway, and this line could take people from Fraser Mills to New Westminster and later to Queensborough. Service along this route was hourly and gave people a faster way to get to work at the mill, and it allowed residents to travel to the busier city centres to enjoy shopping and entertainment. It came to an end, the BCER, in 1937, when construction of the ramps for the new Patullo Bridge resulted in line closures and streetcar routes being converted into bus routes. This station remained until the 1960s, when service to it stopped. This building was then moved to Blue Mountain Park in Coquitlam, where it was available for public viewing and it then came to this location in 1999. So that's a little bit of the background about the station. So today I'm going to show you a little bit about the station itself. First, on the outside, I'd like to point out a few things. The sign for Fraser Mills Station is a replica. It's not the original sign for the train station. This wagon that I'm leaning on was the baggage wagon that was used for people's belongings. They would load their suitcases and trunks and whatnot onto it. It would have been a horse-pulled or human-pulled wagon. And an interesting little detail about this is it's the wagon for the station, and it's from this conveyance that the word station wagon, which was later applied to cars, came from. So if you've ever driven a station wagon, hopefully it looked better than this one. And there's also another interesting thing to point out. If you can look up here, if Nolan's going to point the camera up there, hopefully. I didn't prepare him for this. So if you can see the post here, the white post with the arms attached to it at the top, the arms are painted replicas to represent order boards. Order boards were a signaling device based on semaphore that was used by the station agent, who would use them to signal oncoming trains. So if there was an order for the conductor, if one of the arms was down, well, there's two arms, one for each direction. If the semaphore arm was pointing up, it meant that the train should pass on through. There was nothing of note that he needed to know at the station. If the order was sticking out to the side, it meant there were orders to pick up. And some of these things were orders that concerned incidents along the track or changes to routes that people needed to know. And it was a way to get other important updates. As later when we go inside, I'll show you a device that was used to deliver some of these orders, but for now, that's all we need to do. So here we are now in the waiting room area of the Fraser Mills train station. And I'm going to point out a few of the items. When you come and visit the train station, you can check out the details that I'm not going to go over. But for now, we'll just take a look at a couple of things over here. First and foremost, our friend Blanche, who's been waiting forever for her train to come in. She looks a little sour. Perhaps something's gone wrong in her life. Maybe she's been jilted. Beside her is a suitcase, and if you come in, you can take a closer look at some of the contents that are representative of what people may have taken on the train. There's a brownie box camera, some grooming items, a few clothing items. So you can come in and take a look at that. And above Blanche in the suitcase is the Seth Thomas clock. The Seth Thomas clock is a reproduction of the clocks that were used by the CPR. This one was produced by Bradley Woodworks, and it's a limited edition of 100 reproduction clocks. So it's got the CPR logo above the 18 at 6 o'clock there. There's a little circular logo with the beaver and a maple leaf. And it also has another interesting little feature. If you look at 3 o'clock, the Roman numeral 3, the next one you would expect to see would be the Roman numeral 4IV. This clock has 4 eyes, so that makes it kind of an unusual clock. This clock is wound with a key, and it can have the pendulum speed adjusted. And every day the station master would receive a telegram from Montreal telling him the correct time to put on his clock. It would probably also have had a sign beside it stating what region of the country the time referred to. So now we're in the back corner of the Fraser Mills train station, and there are a couple of items here that I'll point out to you. There's a slate schedule board here for the Canadian Pacific Railway Standard Time. It tells you the the train numbers that came through Westminster, Coquitlam, and when it was due and whether it was on time and when it's expected to arrive. So that board is here. There's another one behind me that you can see if you come in person to see the train station. Below it is a big stove. This stove was originally for a caboose, and it was called CPR 23 van. Van is a word that refers to the rear end of something, like the vanguard in an army or the caboose in the case of a train. So this van stove was created by the McClary's Company of London, Ontario. Mom and Dad, there's a shout out to your neighborhood. I know you're expecting it. And it was made by a tinsmith. John McClary started out as a tinsmith in London, Ontario in 1847. And in 1853, when the Great Western Railroad was built through London, the company expanded and began manufacturing stoves like this one. They were in demand for train cabooses. And on the other side of the room, there is the ticket wicket, and you can see that the original grate is there, and this is the spot where people would come to mail things, send telegrams, pick up cablegrams and radiograms, or get their tickets for the train ride. There's also a little red brochure holder for the buzzer, which was, and I believe still is, published for the transit system in Vancouver. You'll see some other postcards and different things in here, so come on in and have a look. Now we're going to move into the business side of the train station. So here we are now in the nerve center of the train station, such as it is. And you'll have noticed that since our last recording, I've changed my clothes, not because I'm a quick change artist, but because we're having a heat wave, a tropical heat wave. You could even say the temperature's rising, which isn't surprising. You get the drift. So here we are in the nerve center of the train station, and this is the desk where the station master would have conducted a lot of his business. And before I talk about some of the items on the desk, I'm going to call your attention to the post that's outside. I don't know if you can see it on the, not Nolan saying you can't see it, but there's a post just outside here which had the order boards on it that I spoke about when we were outside, the ones that you could put down to signal whether or not there's a message for the incoming train. So that the order boards that are on the top of that post would have been operated by a chain pulley situation in here. That's no longer existent in here, but that's how they would have worked it. And if the trains didn't have to stop at every little station, if it was just a little station on the way that they didn't need to stop for, they didn't have to completely come to a stop, they could just slow down, and the station master, if he had any orders for the conductor on the train, could attach the orders to this thing called the conductor's hoop, lean the conductor's hoop out so that as the train came slowly through the station, the conductor could stick his arm through it, pull in the hoop, take off the orders, see what they said, and then he could throw this down beside the tracks. And apparently it was a bit of a sideline for some of the local kids. They would run down the tracks and retrieve the hoops and bring them back to the station master with any luck for a few pennies to spend on whatever. So that's how they could send messages if they didn't need to stop the train completely. So in those days, the orders for the trains were received primarily by telegraph. So some of these items on here are related to the telegraph. These are 3 different versions of telegraph sounders. So they operate by sending messages in code, Morse code, which was developed by Samuel Morse, but also another guy is also credited with that, and his name was, I always forget it, it's Vail. His last name was Vail. So he was a co-founder of the telegraph, the Morse code system. Arthur Vail is his name. So you may or may not know about Morse code, but Morse code sends messages. Each letter of the alphabet is encoded by a series of dots, dashes, the most famous being SOS. I believe it's 3 dots, 2 dashes, 3 dots. So that would have sounded like deep, 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 deep. So that's the longer sound is the dash, the shorter sound would be the dot. So they could send those signals with the sounder, or they could receive them. And when they received them, they would write down the code as it came in, or sometimes they had little ticker tapes that were printed out and you could get it that way. Then they would decode it by typing it out on the typewriter here, and whatever the orders were, whoever had to get them, they disseminated it from that point. This thing over here is a telegraph pedal as well, and I believe that was used in the sending of them. I don't know too much about that artifact. And this is called a scissor phone, for the obvious reason that it scissors out. This was equipped, all the train stations were equipped with scissor phones, and they were direct lines to the railway itself. It wasn't like for public use or anything like that. This station would also have been where local residents would come to send telegraphs to people around the countryside, so they could come here, send telegraphs, or they could go to that ticket window and receive telegrams. And yeah, that's basically what was happening here. So now we're going to, if you do come and see the train station, you can look at some of the forms that were used by the station master and different things we have in here. So now we're going to move over to this side of the nerve center of the train station and look at a few more things, if my friend here will allow it. On this side of the train station nerve center, I guess I've said that a few times, we have a selection of stamps that the station agent would have used at various stations throughout the province and the country, represented here some of the bigger centers like Vancouver, Victoria, Toronto, but also places like and Winnipeg, Salmon Arm, Kamloops, Dawson Creek. You can come and take a look at those. Those are the stamps that they would have used on the documentation that they used here. We also have 3 reproduction posters here that you can come and take a look at. And these were commissioned by the CPR and a guy named Henry Ewart, who was an artist from Saskatchewan. Turn it that way, is that good? Henry Ewart was an artist from Saskatchewan, and he sort of got his foothold in the art business by making these advertising prints for the CPR. He started doing this in 1939. So we have 3 of these prints here that you can come and look at hanging on the wall, and that's another interesting item. We have a display case here that I'm not going to show you right now. It's the one I'm touching. I don't want to give away all our secrets without you coming in to see the train station. So when you come in, there's a few other artifacts and things in here that you might find interesting. The next thing that I will point out is over here on this wall is the original conductor suit. That one's made out of bamboo. The one that I showed you is a reproduction that we are able to use for demonstrations, but that is the original. So you can see there's some other pictures and documents and things in here that you can take a look at. And now we are going to move into the final section of the train station. And now we're in the storage area for the Fraser Mills train station. So here is where the luggage cart would have been parked. The one that was used at Fraser Mills was smaller than the one that you saw out at the front that I referred to as the station wagon. It was a little bit smaller and less hard to pull. You could use, like, it was the one that a human could have pulled, as opposed to that one, which would probably have been harnessed to horses. Although we do make the employees here pull that one out by hand, just as a side note, for their willingness to work like horses. The willing horse gets the work, I believe you say, Dad. This here is a plan. All of the smaller train stations in BC were built to the number 6 CPR standard station plan. So that's a look at how that was laid out. We are planning some more informational panels that are going to be coming in here soon. We haven't got them prepared quite yet, but they will be coming in. And over here, I spoke to you earlier about the, what do you call them, Nolan? The order boards. The order boards. These are some original order boards, and you can see that they have the blue and the red glass in them. So that would have been another way that people could have seen the signals as they were coming down the tracks if, for instance, it was nighttime. So those order boards would have been where the fake wooden ones outside are. The trains came equipped with this item up here. It's called a spark arrestor. So particularly in the days of steam, when locomotives were powered by coal or wood power, usually coal, sparks coming out of the chimney stack were a real problem for creating forest fires or prairie fires. So the spark arrestor was intended to stop those sparks from exiting the smokestack to prevent more forest fires than necessary. You can see we have some other artifacts here in the cupboard, but you can come and take a look at those yourself. I will talk about the lanterns up here. The lanterns were used for signaling up and down the length of the train and along the tracks before the days of radio. And you could swing them in particular patterns, like an arc or up and down, or shutter them and unshutter them so that it was a light signal to tell the conductors or whoever needed to know different things as they were operating the train. And the insulators, these things here, were used on the telegraph lines. So that's all we're going to talk about today at the train station here at Fraser Mills stop. You're welcome to come in and see more that we have here on display. There's lots of things to look at. We are open on weekends during the summer, beginning on Fridays and across Saturday and Sunday. So come on down to the train station and have a look for yourselves. I'll leave you at the end here with this model train as it zips around. You'll be able to take a look at that. This one is built to the 1 to 187th scale of a full-size train. So he's zipping around there.